Now let's just concentrate on some of the tags or some of the components in JSF. So we have already seen the head tag or the head component, the body component, we have seen the form component, and we've seen the input text and command button. Now let's talk about some attributes. For the input tags and as well as the command button, I have mentioned an ID attribute. I haven't mentioned the ID attribute for the form tag. So what happened is, if you view the page source, an auto ID was generated for the form tag. And that auto generated ID got prepended to all the tags inside of the form for this input tags over here and as well as for the command button. Many times in JavaScript you will be accessing these tags for maybe designing these tags or just taking the values out of these tags. So this behavior of this ID getting prepended over here, it may not be desirable. So we can change this default way. So instead over here I'll mention prepend ID as false. Now let's save and run this application. And now if you see the page source, the ID of the form tag didn't get prepended for the input tags as well as for the command button. Now let's consider our next component, which is InputSecret, and the ID, let's make it password, and let's use a value binding which we'll write later on. So let's first create a field for value binding this. So here's the field, and let's create getters and setters for this. Getters and setters password. Okay, and now you can value bind this animal bean dot password. Okay, now let's save and run this application. Some word over here. Okay, now let's save and run. And here's the output. We haven't put BR over here, that's why this comes on the same line. And if you watch the page source, it's a input type is equal to password. Okay, for input secret, input type is equal to password is rendered. Let's now consider the next tag, which is input text area. So over here, let's type input text area, select this, and let's give it rows of 5, and let's give it columns of 50, and let me give it an ID of my text. Let me close this off, and over here let's value bind this to a field over here or a property over here. So let's name the property as my text. Let's create getters and setters and select this, and over here let's put a value attribute. The value is animal bean dot my text. So let me enter some text for this. So over here some text, and let's run this example. So here's the output. So basically a text area has been rendered. If you view the page source, it's a text area, and the ID is my text, and the columns is 50. That is 50 columns are shown with 5 rows. There are 5 rows and 50 columns. Okay. Right now we are not processing these outputs, but you can just well imagine that when this method gets called, you can utilize all these values and perhaps save them in a database or do something else, maybe show them. Now the next tag we'll see is input hidden. So H input hidden. Okay, and let's give it an ID of something like my hidden field. Okay, and let's close this off. Let's save and run. Save, run, and here's the output. So if you view the page source, at the very end here is your hidden field with input type is equal to hidden. So hidden field is basically not displayed on the page, but it's used for transferring information back and forth between the server and the browser. Now let's consider the next component, which is output text, which you have already seen before. So output text, and let's value bind this to animal bean dot type. Okay, and now both the input text as well as the output text are bound to the same field type, and for the action attribute, let's remove this action attribute totally, which means that when you submit this page, the same page is rendered back. So index.xhtml page is shown back when you click this button. So whatever value typed over here, we are going to get that value over here again. Let's say, let's run this application, run, and here's the output. So if I type something over here and then I click the submit button, the same page is rendered back because we have removed the action attribute of this button, and here's your output text. Now let's consider the next tag, which is output format. So the tag is output format, and it works like message format class from the Java EE library or Java SE library. So here we'll write some text. Was a good. Okay. Now let's provide values for this parameters for 0 and 1. fparam value is equal to Sam. Okay. And fparam okay. So Sam, this place will get substituted with Sam, and 1th place will get substituted with kid. So Sam was a good kid. So let's run this application. Run. And here's the output. The next component we'll understand is graphic image. So over here, first of all, I created an images folder under web pages, and I created a sample image in it. So over here, let's have graphic image, and the URL should be /images/interceptor binding ordering.png, and let's close this tag, and let's give a BR over here. Let's run the application. So let's save and let's run, and here's your graphic image. So before proceeding ahead, let me show you a sample file. So this is a basic HTML file. It's not a JSF page, it's a HTML file. So we have two input fields, username and password. We have a form with method of type post, and let's run this application. And there's a link over here which links to one of our pages in a website. It can just link to any other page, maybe google.com, whatever, but right now let's run this application. So here's the output of that page. So let's first turn Firebug on. So I'll press the F12 key, and here's the Firebug panel. So let me tell you a very important fact. Whenever you type something in the address bar or you press any link in your page, a GET request gets sent. Whereas when you submit a form, a POST request gets sent. So let's see that. First, when I press this link, you can see GET requests are being sent. And when I type something in the address bar and press enter, again a GET request gets sent. Okay. Whereas if I type something over here, and when I press the submit button, a POST request gets sent. Now let's understand two important points. First of all, the method has to be mentioned as POST. By default, the form has a method of GET, so this will be sent as a GET request. So if you mention this as POST, then only a POST request gets sent. And the second point is, if you place this link inside of your form, still the link will lead to a GET request. It won't lead to a POST request. So basically, a GET request gets sent when you type something in the address bar or click some links, and a POST request gets sent when you click a submit button and the form method is POST. A link inside a form doesn't submit the values. Only a submit button when clicked will submit the values of its related form. Now the next controls we are going to study is command button, command link, button and link. So these two controls are used for posting the form along with the form values, and these two controls are used for sending the GET request. They do not submit the form with the values in it. You know, previously I had mentioned that links usually send a GET request and the submit button usually sends a POST request, but not so in this case. JSF modifies the behavior a little bit. So command button and command link always send a post request. Even though command link appears as a link or appears as an A tag, it sends a post request. And button and link over here always send a get request. So do not go on the appearance of the button or a link to decide whether it sends a get request or post request. If we use this controls, command button and command link, it will always send a post request and all the surrounding form values will be submitted. Whereas this will always send a get request and the form in which they are submitted, or if they lie within a form or outside a form, they never send the form values with it. Always a get request will be sent. Now let's start with the first control, that is command button. So I'll remove this off for time being, and as I'd mentioned, we have to specify action attribute in which we either specify the page name directly over here like this, or you can even specify the extension if you want, or you can specify a bean method like this, animal bean dot save animal, and remove this curly brackets, and this is the method which is going to be called. So if we mention the page name directly, that's the page the control will go when this button is submitted, or whatever the value this method returns, this is the page where it's going to go finally. So let's save and run this application. So let's enter animal name, count of the animals is 4. So let's submit this. It went to the show page and this was the output, zebra 4, because if you see the show page, it had two output text components displaying the type and the total number. Now let's say we want to display the output on the same page. We do not want to go to the another page. So instead of this, we can specify something over here. Output text, and the value will be animal bean dot, let's show the type, okay, and let's display the total number. Value is equal to animal bean dot total number. Okay, so this time I would prefer to have the values on the same page itself. When the page is submitted, I would like to remain on the same index page. So instead over here, I can just return null. So by null, I mean that we have to show the same page again. So let's run this application. Now this time you won't be going outside this page, okay, because the return value is null. So let's see how this works. So let's mention animal name and the total count 8, and that's what gets displayed over here because we have output text tags in our page, and because in our page this method returned null. Instead of using this method of always returning null to remain on the same page, we have another attribute for that. So instead of action, we can use ActionListener like this. So I'll delete this attribute with the value, and instead of action, this time I'll use ActionListener. And before that, let's create a method. So the method is public void some method, and it takes an action event E. Okay, and let's just paste this over here. And now in your index page, we'll mention this method name like this. Animal bean dot some method. Okay, and let's remove this off. Let's save. So the change I made is, instead of the action attribute along with this method which returns null, I used ActionListener along with this method which accepts an action event and which does the same thing as our same animal method. The thing is, we do not have to return anything. It takes void as the return type. We do not have to return anything, and we always remain on the same page. So whenever you are using action attribute with the method always returning null, try considering this method which you don't have to return anything and which always remains on the same page. Now let's consider the next component, which is command link. So command link works exactly like command button. Only thing is it appears like a link. They both send a post request and submit the surrounding form values. So even though this appears like a link, they always post the request. So let's see an example. Go over here and let's change this button to a link. That's the only difference you have to make. Both action listener, almost all the attributes of both the components are same. So let's run this application. Save and run. And now you can see that instead of a button, there is a link. Even though it's a link, it will submit this form. So let's see. Let's have this over here and 8. Let's submit this form. And as you can see, it has submitted the form along with the values in the form. So just to show you that whether it's a command button or command link, the form is submitted along with the values. I opened Firebug over here. So go to Net tab and let's submit the request once again. So as you can see, it sends a post request. This is just the request for the JavaScript file which the JSF runtime uses. So over here, if you go to the post tab, you can see these two attributes have been sent along with the post request. Now let's consider these two tags, button and links. So button and link always send a get request and they never submit the surrounding form values, unlike this which always submit the form values. So these two act alike and these two act alike. They never submit the surrounding form values. So let's try with H button. I'll specify the tag over here and let's give it an ID of some button. Okay, and let's give it a value of, the value is what gets displayed on the button. Show. Okay, and show me values. And instead of action and action listener over here, in button and link we have the outcome attribute. Okay, and the outcome is the name of the page, or if you want to mention some method over here, so let's mention the show page over here. Let's save and run this application. Before that, let's just delete this off. Save and run. And this is the output. So if I enter something over here, a cat, and number of cat is 9, show me values. And basically the show page doesn't have any values. Why is that? Because as mentioned over here, sends a get request and it does not submit the surrounding form. Now there is another tag, output link, which is used to display a tags in your page. So basically these two tags I have shown separately because these are much more powerful than your just link tags. We'll see these tags later on in much more detail, but right now let's see output link. Output link is basically used to display normal links in your website. So for example, H and output link, the value says where you want to go to. So http://www.google.com. Let's close this tab and go to Google. Okay, let's put a BR over here and let's save and run this application. And here's the output. Go to Google. If you view the page source, here's the tag. It's a normal A tag with href attribute, and the text is over here. I forgot to mention that hlink and button are similar, so instead of button you can even specify a link over here, and the only difference will be it will display as a link, but it will always send a get request. It won't be submitting the form values, just like H button won't. So let's save and run this application once again. And here's the page output. So hlink appears like a link, but it doesn't post the page, it just sends a get request. So these values are not sent. If we click, no values are sent in this page.